Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Wherever you are in the world today, right now you're on the new way, or some way. Who knows what the way is? We can never tell. There's all sorts of things happening, and you never know what's going to happen. So, welcome to the show. And here comes Bruce. Hey, Bruce. We are live.
Hey, Lenny, how are you? What's that? We're
We are
live?
live today.
Okay, good. That's good.
Let me turn up the sound a little so I can hear you. All right.
It could be me, really. I could turn it up a little bit too. Did you hear anything from Howie?
No, I sent him in fact, I sent him the same message I sent you,
Right.
and then I popped Harris a message through the Discord.
Good. Well, hopefully we'll have a nice, nice discussion here.
Welcome to 2024. It is nothing like 2023. The world hasn't collapsed yet.
Yeah. Well, I have a feeling we've got a lot to look forward to this year. It's going to be a roller coaster, I think.
Yeah, do you know how wave functions work?
To some degree, yeah.
Well, the way I look at it is that the world is a wave function and it collapses into degeneracy all the time. So when
Right.
we get out there, we can vibrate with all the times that are working. But eventually we start paying attention to what the news media tells us and we collapse into that degeneracy. So as long as we don't pay any attention to the news media, we don't have to worry about what's going on in the outside world. Although you never know, you might get a knock on your door and find that United Nations agents are coming in to arrest you because you weren't using the right pronouns.
Well, speaking of degeneracy, let me read something I just posted as a comment on Facebook. I just posted it a couple minutes ago. I said,
Facebook. Okay.
speaking of politics, I bumped into a friend at the grocery store yesterday, and it didn't take her long to mention the 2024 election. I responded by admitting I'm concerned that the deep state may assassinate Donald Trump, to which she added, that would be a blessing in disguise. Now, I'm not a devout Trumpist, but this is one more thing that truly concerns, if not horrifies me, that so many self professed good hearted Democrats have been so brainwashed and turned against Trump by the mainstream media that rather than a democratic election, they prefer assassination. So, what the fuck has happened to people in this country? It's amazing. Just a conversation in the grocery store.
Well, here's the thing, this concept of country is over. We don't need it. It's too large. And all the brainwashing we got in school about pledging allegiance to a flag, to a
Right,
republic that the flag supposedly stands for, is just
right,
nonsense and brainwashing. And it's going to take a long while for people to kind of figure out that you can't have a single nation of what, 300 million people on the same page, no matter what you do. And all
right,
these people on both sides are saying, "Oh, we can fix everything if only everybody would agree with us."
right.
Aren't going to fix anything from either side. There's a big muddle in the middle, and that puddle contains people who've been watching major media, and the media lies. Not only does it lie, it sort of cheats too. It shows you
What's it about?
pictures that have been made by AI and implies that they're real. It tells you about people who they're told to tell you about, but most of the people doing good stuff do it under the radar screen.
Well, and for good reason. because people are routinely, um, if not punished, they are at least shadow banned for doing good things and for speaking the truth. I mean, and I'm one of these people that I'm still on Facebook. It's the only place that I'm really posting. I'm not writing, I'm not blogging anymore. I and I no longer have a website that promotes my writing. And so, I just extemporaneously post on Facebook periodically. Um, I try not to be too controversial for obvious reasons, and it's just it just amazes me. It amazes me how really not only brainwashed but absolutely violently brainwashed some people are. This is a little old lady, okay, that I'm talking about. She's the same age as me. She's actually 10 days older than me, born 10 days, her birthday is 10 days before mine in the same year. You know,
Well,
and
the medical community has a name for that. It's called Trump derangement syndrome.
yeah, there's a lot of it going around, that's for sure.
But you see, that's the whole point of this. You got a choice between Trump and Biden, neither of which any sane person would vote for. But the whole concept of voting is totally insane. Your vote means absolutely nothing,
No, the
even
vote is
more nothing now
well,
that they've rigged the system.
the vote is a grand fiction, like our history. Our history, we've been lied to since we were little children, and our parents were lied to. The whole history of our country is contrived, and it's not true. They
Well,
just rah
my
rah rah. I mean, people died for that flag, which is
my belief is that history was rewritten after World War II to make it mild. And so a lot of stuff was disappeared into the rabbit hole,
hmm
never to come back, or so they wished. But really, if you start reading books that were published before World War II, you find that the thought patterns were different. The people were actually trying to do something. So I
yeah,
think that they switched fact around and started teaching us nonsense in schools in the 1950s. And like we can see how much they're teaching nonsense in the schools now, but we believe we were given a good education because we're smart and we know better. But
yeah,
really, we
yeah,
fell for it. We believe that man landed on the moon, that the Challenger blew up, that the towers fell, and that the Mets won the World Series in 1969.
yeah.
What a
Well
world.
put, because you're you're completely right. You're completely right. Have you ever seen that video of when they were filming the astronauts walking on the moon, bouncing around and whatnot, with the flags sort of still,
With the
and they
flag
were
waving in the no atmosphere air.
right, exactly. And then a door opens in the back, and somebody peeks in and looks around, and then they go, oh wow, and then they shut the door. And the whole thing was done on a stage. It's just amazing.
Sure, Stanley Kubrick took credit for it all. They said
Yeah,
that
yeah.
if he
Well,
did that, they would
who's
let
better
him
than
make
Stanley Kubrick to pick to do
2001.
that? I'm sorry, we were all talking at the same time, but who better than Stanley Kubrick to actually produce a a documentary like that's so seminal to our understanding of ourselves and who we are.
Do you think HAL was artificial intelligence, but presented before we had the concept put on our plate to sort of
Well,
warm us up?
I mean, Hal was a you know a, a computer character created by Arthur C. Clarke And he's one of the greatest science fiction writers of all time. Not the only one, but he's one of them. And
Maybe that's where we need to look for truth, is in science fiction.
well, I mean, I think there's a lot of truth in science fiction, and I was a voracious reader of science fiction when I was younger and read more. Heinlein and Arthur C. Clarke and you know,
Gotta start reading again.
Well, I could start reading again. I must admit that I'm not motivated to read as much as I used to be by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, I've got Stranger in a Strange Land on the shelf. That's a pretty good place to start, because right now you could see it. If somebody came to this world and tried to make sense of it, there's no way. There's no sense in what you see as provided by the sources that we're supposed to believe for understanding. But each of us knows what we know, and if we have firsthand experience, we can apply what we know to our reality. And in some ways, I think the whole thing is going to collapse with a whimper, not with a bang. And then we'll all be here looking to create our own wave functions from our individual beings.
Yeah, well, I prefer that analogy, Lenny, rather than, I mean, a lot of people are talking about the possibility of civil war because the Democrats are so radicalized, and Joe Biden is just such.
Hey, wait a minute. The Republicans are so radicalized, and Donald Trump is such a. You could say the same exact thing about both of them.
Yeah,
they're just phenomenal.
I do think that Donald Trump has more operating neurons in his brain than Joe Biden does.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter because he's just following the script.
Well,
and the script that they're given doesn't make sense to us because we're not on the same page.
Yeah.
But I really wonder what's going on with the money system that favors people who steal the money from other people and have purchased the legal system and the political system, so that if you're just trying to make it getting by, you can do that, but there's no opportunity in this land of opportunity. The options that we have are get shadow banned or don't speak.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Yeah, and I agree with you completely. It's.
Well, it says we've been on for 15 minutes now, and we haven't attracted a single eyeball.
Interesting. Nor
yes, it tells me.
Or how.
Yep, it tells me that what's going on is basically, unless you self-publicize, you get no traction. And if you self-publicize, you can get other people to publicize you. But the name of the game is a different scale entirely. And what we need to do is be functional in the first person, do something that will keep us going, and then gradually allow it to expand to reach other people.
Well, as you know, I've written 3 novels and I've self-published 1. Came out in 2013, but it was self-published, and there was no vehicle for. There was a vehicle for distribution. It was distributed by the largest bookseller in the world, but nobody bought it because nobody knew about it. And so I eventually took it off the market. And I'm no fan of self-publishing anymore for that very reason. If I try to publish again, and I'm not motivated to do so anymore, I've got to have a really first class agent. And the last time I had a first class agent, I sent him a copy of my book. He called himself the Lion of Literature. I won't use his name, but he was, and probably still is, one of the most sought after agents in this country. And I sent him a copy of my first book, A Season in Babylon. And he responded by saying, I can't sell your book in this market because it was controversial. And I wrote back to him this was email. I wrote back to him and I just said, you don't have the cojones to sell this book in this market. And he said, you'll never work here again. That was the end of our relationship right there.
Yeah, when we were in Ashland, I walked into a publisher in Ashland with a copy of a book I had written, about 200 pages, with full colored pictures. And he flipped through it and he said, yeah, this looks good. I'll publish a mock-up for you for $10,000.
Right.
It's like, yeah, right. Thank you. Goodbye.
Yeah, right.
Publishers price themselves out of the league. And, really, publishing is controlled by academia. And academia has this publish or perish thing where if you don't keep publishing your work and really push the forefront of the known science, then you sort of fade off.
Right.
But there are different reasons why scientists don't publish their work, like non-disclosure agreements that you're forced to sign before you get your first job. Because if you don't put your name on the paper saying you'll follow their rules and let them arbitrate decisions and yada, 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 you don't even get that first job. So when it comes time to publish, if they choose to publish as a patent instead of publishing in the open literature, then you never see that work at all. And the patent goes to somebody who's got money, and they either invest in it or they put it on the shelf and hide it away, and nobody gets to see the work. And we are living in a world where the forefront of knowledge is no longer covered at the university because most of the professors have patents in collusion with industry. Thank you, Bill Clinton. And they can't talk about their work even to their students. So you get very much rice pudding, total pablum as to what's coming out of the university system. And I tell you, last week I really had to laugh at the Harvard controversy.
Oh, yeah.
The dictator at Harvard University apparently plagiarized her entire life. And so she gets the big rewards by publicizing other people's ideas as her own. And everybody thinks Harvard is Ivy League and wants to get there. But the joke's on us because Harvard and Yale pretty much bought the system. And if you're not a graduate of one of those two schools, you can't even get a position that matters. Oh, wait, there's some Stanford folks that they let in the mix because they need a little bit of West Coast influence.
Sure.
But the game of pedigree is just, you got to have one. And the scientists that you work with make up your future. And now what we're finding is most of science is bully. They come up with an idea and they throw it down your throat and you have to accept it. And depending on who it is, science advances one funeral at a time because you can't criticize people while they're alive. But as soon as they die, fair game, just attack. And so people like Stephen Hawkins, who was not correct, but was deferred to by everybody until he passed away,
Yeah.
now can be seen for the joke he was, but we're basing everything third or fourth generation on fictitious matter. And so we really need to go back and pull out Rudolf Steiner, Walter Russell, and people from that era just to get the mindset of the framework because the whole frame was shifted. Hollywood,
Yeah.
AI in initial form.
Yeah. Rudolf Steiner was especially uh, fluent in not only science but common sense. And I just read a quote by him. I didn't save it. I just read a quote by him earlier today, this morning, that was just just profound because it made so much sense, and it was so you know reachable. I mean, everybody could understand, and you didn't have to think too much to appreciate what the man was saying. He was talking real sense. He's one of them. But there's a lot of
There's a
writers.
lot of
Back in those days. I mean, Leo Tolstoy, and I mean, you could name just not, the science fiction writers that have already been mentioned. They they spoke the truth. And it's rarely spoken now. And those of us who make an effort to speak it are censored.
Yeah, well, what passes for truth nowadays really isn't. And when you start looking at the building blocks, they don't quite add up. They add up in a way that sort of makes sense enough that you're not going to catch it until you really look at it. But things like electricity and magnetism, well, think about it. We've had the same sort of light switch to turn on the electric bulbs in our houses ever since we were wee little kids. And it's not the most efficient form of lighting, but it was one that could be mass produced and at a profit. And
Yeah.
so, what did they do? The big change in our lifetime. They took out incandescent bulbs that actually work and substituted these energy safe bulbs that don't run more than a year and a half, 2 years. So you're
Right. Most
continually
of that happens.
replacing light bulbs expensively instead of having one light that runs forever.
Yeah, I just replaced a bunch of light bulbs at the request of my son here in my apartment with those energy saving LED
Well,
bulbs.
as an experiment, keep your eye out and see how long they actually last. And I'd be willing to bet you that within a year, by January 3rd, 2025, at least one of those lights will have blown.
Yeah, it's quite possible. And of course they advertise them as, and they'll last forever. But we know better.
The other thing is they made them of sizes that don't actually fit where you're putting them. So instead of a nice small round bulb, you've got this screwy circular light that if you put in a lamp, you can't put the lampshade on anymore.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, that's that's all by design too, wouldn't you say? It's like these computers we're using. Planned obsolescence is built in to these computers and the keyboards and the mice and everything. And periodically you've got to buy another one because it fails and it isn't working anymore.
Yeah, I'd say the shelf life of a computer might be 3 years. And nowadays, Microsoft just hijacks the whole system and sends you an upgrade whether you want it or not. And if you don't take the upgrade, it slowly starts to fail more visibly.
Yeah, I'm working with Windows 7 right now. Still with Windows 7. I don't remember when that first came out, but it's an old operating system, and I have kept I have kept current to a certain degree only because I never use the downloads. I mean, they've been telling us that they don't support the platform anymore anyway. Yeah, yeah. I gave up smoking in 2023. Yeah,
I know. And as long as you don't smoke with me this morning, it'll continue on for, at least another 12 hours or so.
yeah. Well, I'm doing fine so far.
Good. I find that, to me, smoking puts me in a more moderate, immediate situation. I think what it does is it takes my resonance, and instead of spreading it out in a bell shaped curve, it narrows it so that I'm just a little more focused. And I think marijuana is very healthy for the body. It's a natural product. It'll do much better than ibuprofen or some sort of stamped pill that everybody is convinced they have to take anytime they have a small owie or a headache.
Right.
Really, to me, if I have a headache and I can't get rid of it by smoking marijuana, it tells me that I need to go to sleep. But sometimes, if I've smoked a lot of marijuana and I get a headache, smoking marijuana does not contribute to solving that one.
No.
But I've got some fire syrup that I have been using this winter to keep the colds away. And syrup is made of three ingredients. Uh, it's made up of apple cider vinegar, water, and cayenne pepper.
Yeah. Wow. Cool.
And you put the cayenne pepper into the apple cider vinegar, add enough water that you mellow out the sting, if you know what I mean,
Yeah.
and shake it up. And just a little nip, like if you were nipping on a bottle, uh, one nip and you're good for the day. And that cayenne really clears you out pretty good.
Hmm.
And what it does is it eliminates the purview of the common cold, also known these days as COVID.
Right.
And so I've only been really sick once this winter, and I had the sniffles and a runny nose and just didn't feel like doing much. But I was only down for like 2 or 3 days. And other people in the area were also sick and they were down like a week to 10 days. So, fire syrup.
Yeah. I'll,
Definitely.
I'll, I'll try that out, Lenny. I've got the ingredients. I have not been sick with any flu like anything since 2018.
Good.
That's a
Now,
long time, and everybody else is getting sick all around me. They're getting sick all around me, and I'm exposed to these people. I just received I just received an email or a text from someone at a local nursing home where one of their patients is an old friend of mine. He's 81 now, and he made me his uh, what do you call it? When you are in, you know, you are
heir or
what?
executor?
Well, he didn't make me his executor or his heir, but he made me the guy that they consult for all of his legal decisions and medical decisions. Um,
Power of attorney.
Power of attorney. Thank you. And so I've been his power of attorney now for a couple of years. And I wish I could go see him more often because, as you know, I don't have a car, and the nursing home's quite a ways away. But they sent me this email or text this morning, and they said a certain number of people in that facility have been diagnosed with COVID. And so you need to be careful if you come here. You need to wear a mask and blah 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 blah. And I wrote them back, and I said to them, and you've already heard this from me once before, but I massaged it a little bit. I said, I was drinking coffee at the time, and I says I could test my coffee right now for COVID, and it will come back positive. And of course they're probably not going to respond. Although I hope they do a COVID test on their coffee or whatever they're drinking, because they'll probably be absolutely amazed.
Well, that's what's the official cause of death for my mom.
Is it? Yeah.
It
Well,
is.
she was in the hospital.
Yep.
They make money for that call.
Absolutely.
The
And that's
hospital
why
makes
it
money.
works. There's
Yeah.
a lawsuit in Texas right now that's going to go after some of big pharma and the medical profession idea that they can give bonuses for killing people. But
Right.
that's what's really the problem with this thing we call a country
Yeah.
is that the people who are running things don't have clue as to what their job is. What they have clue to is how to work the system to make more and more. And so
All about
starting
money.
at the top, you've got grifters and essentially anybody who's getting into politics either thinks politics is the same as it was in the 1990s or is specifically a grifter. And they weed them out anyway, because if somebody who's actually trying to change something gets elected, they threaten them or they bribe them. And if you don't take the bribe, you get the threat. And if you ignore the threat, they actually have people who enforce.
Yeah.
And so
Right.
I know from my life, I have a second sense of when it's time to go. And when it's time to go, I act like a tree and leave. And so I've walked away. Well, heck, when I left Ashland, I don't think I told you I was leaving. I think I just took off and disappeared.
Yeah, I've
I
done that
didn't,
a number of times from a number of places.
yeah, I didn't tell anybody where I was going or what I was doing. I ended up moving up to Central Point from Ashland. And at that point, when I was in Central Point, an opportunity to do some gold assay came up. And so I learned some new chemistry and began doing gold assay, which
Cool.
is all well and good. It would cost me a couple $1,000s to set up a lab to do gold assay. And I'm thinking that in the next year or two, that's going to be necessary, both gold and silver assay, because we're going to be back to using that for money. And, I'm not talking about the nice round 1 ounce coins that you can now buy. Hey, gold was up over 2000 for most of December. But I'm thinking that it's going to be scraps of gold and silver gold from jewelry that gets traded,
Right, and
because
silverware.
there you have an assay and you know what the value is.
Mm-hmm.
But the value they give us for gold at being like 2050 and silver being at 24,
24.
there's something
That's pretty
wrong with that
lopsided.
ratio. I want to take any gold I have and change it in for 80 times that amount of silver.
Yeah.
But the problem with silver is to get substantial value, it is of substantial weight.
Yep.
But just think about the way you were taught chemistry in school. And I'm convinced that in the 1920s and 30s, Walter Russell had a different understanding of chemistry, but we got the Einstein Mendeleev periodic table. This is how it works, no choice, everything tied up in a neat little bow. And protons, neutrons, and electrons are a construct, but the construct works, so we use it to predict things in chemistry based on the elemental values. And yes, we can identify 100 different elements that each have a different value of protons, neutrons, and electrons. But there are things called isotopes that are very important, where the same atom, because that atom is of a substance because of the number count of the protons, neutrons, and electrons,
Right.
can have different number of neutrons and electrons, but it's the protons that matter. So chlorine, for instance, has a 35 weight and a 37 weight isotope, and they're in nature, it's a 3-to-1 ratio as to which isotope you get. So if you look at your periodic table, you get, I think, 35.5 as the average chlorine weight, but it's made up of 35s and 37s, and there's no partial weights because by definition protons and neutrons have weights of 1 and electrons have no weight at all because they're 1,000 times less and it's not statistically significant. But I'm pretty sure that this year I'm going to talk a lot of chemistry because we need to dig deep into our sciences and figure out what we've been told that isn't true that's holding us up. But a lot of what's holding us up is the patent system and the lawyers, and the fact that if you know somebody who can do something like run a car on water, isn't it amazing how just after you find out that person seems to have a fatal accident or just disappears into the woodwork?
Right.
And so I don't publicize anything that I'm doing outside of what makes sense in the real world, but I now spell that real world REEL.
Yeah, because they will definitely disappear you if you do. You know, it's just the way things are working now. You know, it's pretty easy to get horrified by what the hell's going on in this country and in the world. But I mean, this is the forefront of all of that crazy stuff. The United States of America, you know, the land of the free and the home of the brave, you know, which is to some extent true. But go ahead.
It's time for a voluntary commercial.
Okay.
Today's voluntary commercial is for Pacific Domes because I just got a text message from Asha.
How's Asha doing? I'd love to see her again.
I talked to Asha this weekend as she was going up to Portland to deliver presents to grandchildren.
Nice.
So she was in a very happy mood.
Yeah.
And she seemed to be doing well.
Good.
And we are going to talk about some things that might have implications on healing down the road.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to mention what those things are because we don't have our agreements in place. But just the fact that good friends still have to have legal agreements in place to discuss things makes no sense at all.
Right.
I remember being blown away 15 years ago by a guy named Nassim Haramein.
Yeah.
Who showed up to our group and talked about physics in a way that made sense and was reachable to people. And he was extremely chip on the shoulder upset that the physics world would not take him seriously because he didn't go to college and get the degrees that you need to be considered a physicist who knows what he's talking about.
Yeah.
So fast forward to now 15 years later, and Nassim is very well respected in physics because he knew what he was talking about, not because he had the degrees.
Right.
But all those clowns with degrees have made up things like quarks. If there's chemistry based on protons, electrons, and neutrons as the smallest piece of chemistry that you can work with called an atom, this is still bigger than the smallest bit, which is like 10 to the minus 34th, where minus 34 power means 0.00034 times and then a 1.
Yeah. Right.
But then what we're talking about is subatomic matter called quarks, which are named top and bottom, up and down, charmed and strange. And these quarks work with charges of a third and two-thirds. And so it takes three quarks to make a nucleus in an atom, which is all made up because the idea of chemistry is starting from one. And if you go to subatomic chemistry, you're not starting from one anymore. But I tried to find the theory of the chemistry of quarks, and it just doesn't exist. It's one of those things that was made up backwards, which is implied from what they taught, but has no sense in the reality. Time doesn't run backwards, although maybe it does.
Well,
And
I've
as
tried
you
to say a
start
number of
thinking
times,
about
there's no such thing as time. We invented time.
time and space are constructs, and once they got rid of the ether and pushed the Einstein concept of relativity of time and space, they took us out of what we actually knew and substituted a theory that now you can see doesn't work. But when I say a construct, what I mean is something that humans came up with that seems to work, and so we'll run with it. But to believe that that is what it is, when, gee, I don't know. They have these things called scanning tunneling electron microscopes, and they use them to look at that scale, so to speak. But when you go through and you find out what they're actually showing you about different scales, there's always this disclaimer that this is an artist's rendition of what they're talking about. And so anything bigger than a planet falls into the category of rocks and stars, and anything smaller than, well, quarks are made up of what, leptons and other things. Anyway, quarks are now smaller than the atom, which was supposed to be the smallest thing, so that we had a basis set of one. But if we go out to 10 to the minus
Wait a
34,
minute now. The, the atom, we at least know that an atom is composed of neutrons, protons, and electrons, all of whom are smaller than the atom.
by definition, those are subatomic particles.
Okay.
But to do chemistry, you start at the atom. If you're a physicist, you don't have to start at the atom. If you're a biologist, you start at the cell, not the atom.
Right. Pretty much.
But it's all a matter of scale, and physics is supposed to underpin chemistry. Chemistry is supposed to underpin biology, and math is supposed to be a technical language that unites all three of those.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't really work that way, and the models don't converge, and they really don't need to converge, except that what they're teaching in people in school is not true and won't get you anywhere.
Oh,
Gesundheit.
thank you very much. May you share in the blessing. Wow. I've always been a violent sneezer. I don't know why. Yeah.
Maybe it's your body just shaking itself up.
Yeah, maybe so. I don't know.
All right, my friend. It was good to have a conversation with you. I'm glad we got to talk some chemistry because now there's a reason for people to go back and review some of the basic chemistry we talked about. And the whole thing about chemistry is it's about balance and balanced equations, and that if you have something in your products, it has to be accounted for by what was in your reactants because something had to go to make it to be there physically. And so, if physical reality exists, then atomic chemistry represents an explanation that could be true.
Could be.
That's an interesting if then clause because it leaves a lot of wiggle room that says, really, it's not true. It's made up based on the system that we've been taught and works for us within this system to a degree.
Well, it's been good to talk with you as well. Plenty. I wish that Howie and Harris might have joined us.
Well, we'll have time for them.
Oh, yeah,
I
sure.
believe that the amount of people that are on the stream affects the amount of usage that it takes. So that talking with just you is about half as much streaming capacity as having four of us talking in the stream.
Right, which
But
adds to your ability to
right.
stream
But
longer.
once things get settled in the world, I'm going to probably invest in more hard, constant.
Hardware.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll get there, and for all of those listeners out in Revolution Radio Land, uh, our heart goes out to you for the passing of Mona Radler, the feral hippie, who passed away last week before the new year and won't get to share 2024 with us. But Mona was a good friend, and we'll
Mona
miss
passed
her
away?
stuff. My friend Mona Radler.
No, I'm thinking
She's
of the Mona that I know. I don't think her last name was Radner. She lived down in the Colstein.
no. This is somebody who lived in North Carolina,
All
but
right.
was a really good friend. I stopped there on my summer trip, and so I am glad that I spent the time. And
Yeah.
she passed really quickly. It was she's on the radio on Friday. There's dead air on Monday, and by Wednesday I had found she had passed. So shout out to Revolution Radio. If you want to go hear it, it's revolution.radio. So that's how you can get on the air. There's many good hosts. And my friend Dennis, Open Philosopher, is on in an hour and 10 minutes on Studio B with his Open Philosophy show. So maybe I'll get on and talk with him today. Maybe I won't. You never know. Okay, be well out there in YouTube land, and we shall see you another time. And remember, just be.